Okay. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and let you take over and make your introductions.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 4th annual Women in Science Conference that is dedicated to women in biology. I'm Alicia Kalamian, a community health educator with the Center of Health at Northeastern Illinois University and Chicago Czech. Before we get started into our program, I did want to just provide a couple of reminders. Please stay muted while others are talking, just so that we can all hear the information being shared. There is a hand raising function, so if it seems like it's a very clouded conversation and someone wants to kind of chime in, you can raise your hand and the team here will help call on and let you say your 2 cents. If you'd like to share your video, as I see most of us are, please feel free to do so. We do have the chat function on the side there, so please feel free to enter any questions or comments you might have. Our team might be dropping in some information in there as well, so just keep your eye peeled. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass the floor over to Dr. Shersky for opening remarks.
Thank you, Alicia. I just would like to take a few minutes, literally, to welcome everyone to the annual Women in Science Conference. It is brought to you in part by Chicago Czech. Chicago Czech stands for Chicago Cancer Health Equity Collaborative. This is an NIH-supported U54 Center grant. We are now in our 6th year of existence, and this is our 4th annual Women in Science Conference. Our very first conference was dedicated to Madame Curie in the 200th anniversary of her birth. At the same time, NEIU was also celebrating its existence, the same exact anniversary. Since then, we have had 3 other conferences, actually 2, this is the 3rd one dedicated to mathematics, 1 dedicated to chemistry, and of course, today's conference is dedicated to the field of biology. We have 2 chairpersons who are running the conference this year, and they are both biologists. Dr. Amina Storkovic is one of the organizers, as is Dr. Brecky Church. So I thank them for working with us. They represent also the Mark Grant. They'll speak a little bit about that in a moment in this partnership. But together we have very proud to bring this conference to you this year. I would like to now pass the floor to Dr. Gloria Gibson, NEIU President, for opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to just say welcome to everyone to NEIU's 4th Women in Science Conference. It's very, very exciting. I'm glad that you all can join us today virtually. And my hope is that next year we will be able to see each other, be face to face, give some hugs, and really have that dialogue face to face that is so energetic and beneficial to us all. But this year, we'll move forward and with our conference. And I just want to thank our organizers for their work, our sponsors, our speakers, our panelists, our students, and everyone who is watching today. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. You know, women, as you know, you are those women, are making extraordinary strides in science today. And you are providing bold leadership, which is so very important. I took great pride as I watched the landing on Mars and the women that were right, you know, in that research. They took great pride and then leadership in that research. It's just absolutely extraordinary. And of course, the women who have been involved in the research for COVID-19 to find, treatments all around the world, not just here in the United States, but all around the world. So women in science are really doing the research, finding solutions to pressing societal issues. And for that, I am very, very proud. You are making systemic change, and that is the change that we need. So today, I want to thank each and every one of you for the research that you are doing and the impact that you will make on young girls and our young ladies and our women who are studying, whether it's undergraduate, graduate, postdoc research. You are also making a difference in their lives, because what they will think is, if you are doing it, they can do it too. So again, thank you so much. Welcome and have a great conference. And thank you for allowing me to have a few remarks.
And thank you very much, President Gibson, for opening our conference and taking the time to join us today and give this great introductory remarks. Hi, everyone. My name is Amina Storkovic. I am one of the co-chairs of the conference this year at Northeastern. This is my 13th year at Northeastern. I am a full professor in the Department of Biology, and I have a great pleasure of chairing this conference together with my colleague from Department of Psychology, Dr. Becky Church, who is also present today. As a woman, as somebody who has come to the United States many years ago when I was 18 years old, I experienced a lot from many different cultures, and it's a real pleasure to take a part in organizing this meeting today and have such amazing people to really take part in mentoring, networking, encouraging other young faculty and students and staff who joined us today to participate in the conference. As we know, March is Women's Month, and we learn a lot and reflect a little bit back on where we are as women and what women have done. We have faced a very difficult year due to coronavirus pandemic, and there are some important women that have contributed to amazing solutions that we have today and vaccine development. And I wanted to just take a few minutes to acknowledge this and just share a couple of slides with you. So Joely, can you just enable the screen sharing for me?
Sorry about that.
No problem. So while we are waiting for this, we celebrated March 8th, International Women's Day, and it's been a time to reflect on where we are and who we are. So the International Women's Day was just a few days ago, and we really wanted to fit the conference in the month of March. And I want to acknowledge some important women that really contributed to vaccine development. And Dr. Katalin Karikó, who is a Hungarian biochemist who really worked on developing the mRNA technologies that were critical in developing actually the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. And this was so important. This is such a novel technology and really an important aspect of women contributing to what's happening today. And also the woman that was the first one to image the coronavirus back in the 60s. This is June Almeida, pictured with electron microscope. And I have to thank Dr. Sylvia Braslavsky, who sent a brief email to me. She's a colleague from Max Planck Institute in Germany, wishing to me and several other colleagues happy International Women's Day. And she always points out to these amazing women heroes that we learn about and reflect upon these discoveries. And finally, I just want to acknowledge all the sponsors for today. and including the grant that I have the pleasure of directing with Dr. Church, who is co-chairing the conference with me. This is another NIH grant, and it's really meant for our students. We provide scholarships, stipends, and tuition to a select group of scholars who want to pursue research in their careers. And we are actually actively recruiting students right now from Northeastern for this amazing opportunity. So if there are any students interested in applying who are in the call today, please do join us. And finally, as we go into the conference today, I do want to acknowledge all the women that did take hard sacrifices during this pandemic year. You may be aware that many women have given up on their jobs to be caretakers at home and take care of their children and so on. And many families have gone on to single family incomes. And these women took a lot of sacrifices to make sure that their families can still operate. And so I want to give a nod to all those women who had to put their jobs on hold in order to make it through pandemic or put their careers on hold. And I hope through networking, through today's events and events that are coming March 26th, we'll be able to open up the road again for all the women and to pursue the careers that they wish to pursue. So with that, it's a great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's panel. It's Dr. Nikki Voitovic. Nikki is actually an alumni from Northeastern Illinois University. Nikki was a student in my first graduate course that I taught at Northeastern. So she came as a master's student to our program. And I was just starting to teach at Northeastern, and she did her master's thesis in my lab. We have several publications together. And Nikki went on to pursue a PhD at Rosalind Franklin University in biochemistry after she graduated from Northeastern. And now she's doing some really amazing things at Northwestern University, and a sort of a different career track that is super interesting. And it has a lot to do with celebrating women in science and their accomplishments. So thank you, Nikki, for doing this for us today. And I'll pass on the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Amina, for that introduction, and good morning to everyone who's joined us today. I'm delighted to be able to chair this panel discussion on women in biology, and I think it's really telling and important that we've come together as a community, particularly during Women's History Month, celebrating International Women's Day earlier in the week, by really spotlighting and highlighting different careers and different women in STEM and science, particularly biology, who are doing lots of different things in different ways and different places and different spaces. And it is my hope that through this panel, we'll be able to learn a little bit more about these different opportunities that are available, especially for the students, the different opportunities that are available to you as you may go on and pursue a career in science. And lastly, I think what we can really learn from each other, because we've got a lot of different perspectives coming in on this call this morning. And, you know, speaking about the theme of networking, mentorship, and community building, which is really phenomenal. So I'm really delighted to be joined by the following panelists today. And I will give each panelist, you know, about 5 minutes to talk a little bit about themselves and their background. And then we'll kind of go into some questions. We'll have time, we'll open it up to the attendees to input questions either in the chat or by raising their hand, and we can talk to people directly, or you could send it in the chat to me, to the group, or to me personally if you don't feel like sharing that question directly with the entire group of attendees. And we'll just have a really great dialogue, back and forth conversation about our experiences. And I'll just mention that I would like to thank Northeastern Illinois University for hosting this. I know I would not have been able to go on in my career without the mentorship and education I received at Northwestern. So thank you to all the faculty, students, and staff at Northeastern, this collaborative partnership between Northeastern and Northwestern through Chicago Check, the Mark Grant. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So without further ado, please let me introduce the following panelists. Doctors Lucia Rothman Dennis, Dr. Rabia Mayas, Dr. Michelle Kelly, Dr. Yingting Ko, and Leslie Carrillo. Who is a current PhD student at U of I. So we'll be learning from different career stages, different career places, and I look forward to this discussion. So I will actually start, and I will turn it over to Leslie to give us a little bit of a brief introduction about herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm actually a little shaky because this is something I would have never imagined, to be here with so many powerful mentors and women. And it's still surreal, but my name is Leslie Carrillo Sainz, and I am a third-year PhD candidate at the University of Illinois at Chicago in the Department of Physiology, and my mentor's name is Dr. Pingwen Zhu, and I study the neurobiology of obesity and behaviors such as alcoholism and also binge eating in mice. And a little fun story, I think. Before Chicago Check, I participated in an internship program at Northeastern called the Cancer Health Disparities Summer Research Program, CHDRP. And through that program, I continued to receive email updates after I graduated from Northeastern Illinois and moved on to a post-bac experience at the University of Iowa. And through a volunteering opportunity, I actually met one of my PIs at UAC. So it's a small world. Networking is very important, and I'm glad to be here with you today.
Thank you, Leslie, and it's so very good to see you again. I'm delighted to hear that you've already progressed into your third year of your PhD program, so that's phenomenal. Okay, and speaking of all these wonderful interconnections, let's go to Dr. Lucia Rothman Dennis. I believe you're muted.
Thank you for inviting me to this event. So let me tell you a little bit of background about me. So I'm second generation Argentinian and did actually what here they call college, but it wasn't. It was the university in chemistry, organic chemistry and physical chemistry. And the last course, so I wanted to go to medical school, and my father, being a physician, also a professor at the School of Medicine in Buenos Aires, convinced me that I should not go to medical school. I think I'm one of the few cases where the parents tell you don't do it. And I think my father knew me much better than I did because I was interested in research. So I was very lucky that the last course I took before starting the PhD was in an institute that really, I had taken a course there. It's small, 4 or 5 groups, each group with 3 people. And this is the place where actually nucleotide sugars and the mechanism of glycogen synthesis was discovered, to the extent that the director, who just worked full-time in the lab and didn't have an office, won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, actually in 1970. It was a very special place. And I think I'm mentioning it because it really left in me a mark of how do you get trained. It was just focus on science, and that was it. And I think that training kept me going through. When I finished, as soon as I finished the PhD, I had an offer from NIH to do postdoc, and I came, so there I did biochemistry and came to NIH to do bacterial genetics. And then I moved to Chicago because my husband decided to move to Chicago very reluctantly. I really loved NIH. And so that's something that I want to mention is people ask me, how did you plan your career? I never planned any step of my career. If I would have been told that I was in Chicago here, you know, and the university, at the University of Chicago, I would have laughed at the time. And I think that in terms of, I really care about mentoring, and actually my lab has always had graduate students. I wasn't keen in getting postdocs. Why? Because actually with graduate students, you start from zero, right? And you train them in the way that I liked, right? And with postdocs, it's in many cases has been very difficult. But my goal has always been focusing on the science. That was it. What was going to be very best to the science in the lab, that's what I would follow. I remember I got my first grant when I started as an assistant professor, and actually I was so focused on the science that I never looked at what I had written in the grant. If something more interesting came up, we followed that. That's the way that I really have done. And I've been very lucky, actually. So I have, that's an introduction. I have several ideas that I would talk about that later, but that's it. Yep.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about your strong passion for mentorship, having trained Dr. Storkovic, and by extension, being a part of your academic family tree is very delightful.
Amina is like one of my daughters, actually. I have two kids, well, they are adults now, but they always ask, Mom, do you have two families? Because I talked about the kids in the lab at home. And my kids actually were very confused. Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Dr. Rothman-Dennis. I'll actually turn it over to another University of Chicago affiliate and alum, Dr. Rabia Mayes. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Rabia Mayes. I am an alum. I know, so I think this is speaking exactly to the power of like being in a community of women and mentorship, because Lucia sounds exactly like she did when I was 22 and in the lab and figuring out my life and what I wanted to do. And I think I wanted her to adapt me in some kind of way, but I was not in her lab. But I just want to acknowledge how powerful and amazing you have been to kind of my path and certainly many others. And so it's just beautiful to be in this community. And Amina and I were in the same cohort in graduate school, but she got out faster than me because she's actually a lot smarter than I am. But I just appreciate being here. And so for my introduction, I would say that I, as you've acknowledged, I was at the University of Chicago and was in the biochemistry molecular biology department, and was very excited, I think my entire kind of pre-graduate school path about science, just exploring the natural world and doing something, but did not have a plan at all. So I appreciated Lucia's point about planfulness. And so while I was in school, became really interested in community engagement and education at the K-12 level. And a lot of that is due to the fact that I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area in a suburb, relatively middle class, really great, strong public schools. And so coming to Chicago was a little bit of a shock to me in terms of what we had access to on the university campus, and quite literally 3 blocks away, what young people were having access to and the resources being provided for their education. And it was very clear to me that talent and intellect and ambition and passion is equally distributed across neighborhoods and zip codes, but resources and opportunity were not. And so as I was nearing the end of my graduate career, I was really thinking and wrestling with, honestly, what I wanted to do with my degree. I was excited about science, I did pretty well, but knew that there was something kind of additional that I wanted to do. And in hindsight, I think it really was about the coaching and the mentoring and the engagement with young people that that I had received, that I wanted to kind of contribute back to the community. So long story short, I didn't have a plan. I was about 6 months away from defending, and I was like, I guess I should start looking for a job. And so started applying to postdocs and non-traditional opportunities, and ended up getting a position at the Museum of Science and Industry here in Chicago. It was a 1-year program to help engage Chicagoans around science. And long story short, I virtually never left. So I stayed at the museum for about 9 years. I took a step away. I wanted to kind of see if academia was still calling me. So I went to Northwestern for about 2.5 years and worked within the Office for Research in a public engagement center, which was a great experience. And then the Vice President of Education position opened up at the museum. That was the position to which I had previously reported. Had no intention of applying, but in fact, I was thinking about moving back to DC to be closer to my family, but my husband, who's from Chicago, wasn't quite ready to do that. So the stars aligned, if you will. And so I've been back in this role for about 1.5 years and just feel like it is an incredible privilege to lead education at an institution of this size, to think about how museums and science museums in particular can reimagine their relationship with the communities they serve and how they can be advocates for equity and access and really meaningful engagement with science for young people, in particular women and folks who are non-gender conforming, who have been traditionally excluded and marginalized. So just really excited to be in this role. The pandemic has been really challenging, but I think, again, communities of support and mentorship have been such a driver for me, and I'm excited to be here and talk with all of you today.
Thank you so much. And just to be at an institute like MSI, that's just phenomenal. And I think, and I hope the students here today will have, and everybody else will have a lot to learn regarding public engagement with science and that career path that you've taken. Let's go to Dr. Michelle Kelly, who joins us.
Hi, everybody. So I think I'm the odd man out this morning. I'm not in academics, and I'm not in teaching, really. I did work for a patent search firm. So I am a intellectual property specialist, I guess you could say. And my background started in the sciences. So like Leslie, I went to UIC for my bachelor's and in biochemistry. And I had always wanted to go to graduate school. I always wanted to be a scientist. That was my thing. And I went to LSU, Health Sciences Center, and that's where I met Jolie. We were graduate students there together. And I was in the microbiology department, and I studied eukaryotic pathogens. In immunology to them. And then I made a few, I guess you could say, faux pas in terms of staying in academic research science. In that, I stayed at the same institution for my postdoc. So I got married and I wanted to stay in New Orleans. So I stayed at LSU for my postdoc, even though I switched to the medical school and I was in a clinical department, but I still studied basic research, and I studied pneumocystis infection in the pulmonary environment in a murine model. So I was still in the sciences, and then on and on I went. I was there for some time. I loved it. But then, you know, you have to make life decisions, and there were several things that happened, and I was a member of the postdoctoral. I was a president of the Postdoctoral Association and a member of the Career Development Committee, and we would bring in lots of different speakers for alternative careers. And one of them was a patent lawyer. And so she kind of opened up my idea of what else, you know, was out there. And I knew I had to leave academics. So I really sat down, and it took me like 2 years to make this decision, whether I want to stay in academics or do I want to leave it. And it's a hard decision, but you know, you have to make some decisions in your life. So at any rate, what I had to do was really sit down and think about all my skills and what I loved about what I was doing. You wear so many hats in research science, you know, and so what it is you love and what it is you don't love. And what I really found out was, what I understood about myself, I love analysis. I love focus. And that is really what led me to moving to a patent search firm. So I was hired by a patent search firm, and they were looking for analysts to search and analyze international patent applications. They had a contract with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, where they would get batches of patent applications in the sciences, and then we would have to assess whether they were novel or not. So it's a lot of literature searching, and then, oh, excuse me, apologize for that. Yeah, so then I was working on that for 6-7 months, and then the company moved me to, they created a quality department and a training department, and so then I became the trainer, and I was training new hires and really keeping the quality, and then we created a quality control environment for our work product. So that's a little bit about myself. I have a lot more to say, but it's a little in depth and everything. But I think we can stop there. So I was there for 7 years, and recently I was just laid off, laid off. So I'm looking for my next opportunity. Yeah, so like a lot of us were, we'll see what happens next. But anyway, that's my introduction. We'll talk more in a second.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly, and we're delighted to have you with us this morning. And of course, last but not least, Dr. Yiting Ko, joining us from industry and Eli Lilly.
Hi, I'm Yiting Ko from Eli Lilly and Company, and so I joined you from the dark side of the industry. So I went and did my postdoc at University of Southern California in immunology, and much like Dr. Kelly, I made a bunch of faux pas, choosing the wrong labs, having to switch labs. Took me a lot longer to get out, and then I also did multiple postdocs because I was trying to follow my husband as he moved from city to city. So, it took me till 37 before I started my first job. So it's a really long track. But, moving from academia towards industry, I'd say the biggest difference was, in academia, you work on your science, right? In industry, you don't just work on the science. You start to have to really be very deliberate about how you work and deliberate about your networking, because, even in academia, you want to know who has what skills, and you can run down to whose labs to get some help, right? But that help is often quite limited. But if you network well within industry, you have somebody's entire lab working on your problem. So, it's having that ability when you network well to ask a bigger question, to ask a more complex question. And, within my lab, we've made it a point to pull things back into the society, to the community that we serve. And we often have rotating contractors and interns that we train, because we're in Indiana, where they may not have as much opportunities as Chicago. So, we really try to provide them the kind of exposure, because people don't know what pharma is about. I'd say, before I stepped in, I also had no idea what they were about. And they're very hush-hush about what they're willing to talk about. But, it's still science. You still study a problem. You still have a protein that you study and a systems biology that you try to understand. That's my introduction.
Great. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for those brief introductions. I'll encourage everyone, if you have any questions for our panelists, either as a group or as an individual, please put them into the chat. So I'll actually kick off our conversation with something that Yiting mentioned that I think is very important as kind of leaning into this community building, is networking. So I would love to hear from your experiences, perhaps one time throughout your career, professional academic career, where networking was really a critical component of your success. And I'll open that up to any panelist who'd like to jump in.
So at the University of Chicago, when I started from zero in the sense that I had chosen a system, and actually I've survived because I was very lucky to choose an amazing system. But one of the problems was that in general, if I've had colleagues that really interacted with, we interacted well, and I would consider crucial in terms of my career, the majority have left. And so in many ways, I had to really, there was nobody doing, for example, transcription when I started. And for many years, there was no one. I was the person who started the first course in molecular biology. And, you know, at that time, you know, biochemistry thought, oh, molecular biology, like, we don't touch. So I didn't have a group of people to interact. What really was crucial for me was people in the field outside the University of Chicago. The community actually that developed bacterial transcription really have been my colleagues. And so, you know, even if you are in an environment where you do not get support, it's going outside. It's a community that it's amazing. Yeah. I was very lucky actually, but it has always been a very open community. Yeah. You can get a lot of support from the outside. I think that that's important. And primarily, you know, I've seen colleagues, starting faculty that, oh my God, if I don't get invited to a meeting, I will not go. No, you go to the meeting. You don't need to be invited. You just register and go and interact there. Yeah. I think that that's something very important because I've seen actually people who really ruined their careers because they were in a very successful lab as postdocs. The PI of the lab really just wasn't interested in going to meetings, and they, you know, especially during the last 2 or 3 years of postdoc, they really were going, and then all of a sudden they started their labs and they were not being invited, and they became, you know, enclosed in yeah, it was very sad. So going out is very important. Yeah.
I like to echo that thought of and stress the importance of going to meetings and meeting people. That really is the best forum. And even now in this virtual environment, you know, there are still a lot of virtual meetings, and you have to take as much opportunity as you can to use the chat box and follow up with these investigators, send them emails and say, do you have time to chat? You know, I really like this idea. I love the energy of the poster sessions, you know, that I sorely miss, you know, but that is so critical. And networking doesn't just mean building one network that's stagnant, because these people move. So you constantly have to build your network and maintain them and expand them. So that's really the key thing about networking.
One thing I would add, so when I hear the word networking to this day, it makes me anxious because I'm definitely I'm much more of an introvert, right? Like I'm very social, I like people, but I recharge kind of solo. And so networking feels painful and exhausting as it was originally defined for me, right? Because I think the context is go out there, make yourself available, talk with a lot of people. And I think that is incredibly important. And I would offer that I think what can be really important is figuring out what it is you're trying to achieve with your networking approach. Because I think the approach really needs to follow, just like science, right? Your methodology follows the research question. Your networking methodology, if you will, needs to follow the intent. What are you looking for, right? So if you're looking for academic context and kind of community, if you're looking for a potential path to a postdoc or a career, or are you looking for more of a kind of mentoring role that maybe doesn't need to be connected to a particular field? Maybe it's not even in the sciences or academic. I have found that writing down, so for myself, writing down what it is that I'm needing and looking for at a particular time of my life or at a particular event helps me be a little bit more focused and not feel overwhelmed. And so I know I'm not alone in that kind of sense and feeling overwhelmed, but it also can help set up a conversation. So it can be really awkward to talk to a stranger or to reach out to someone you don't know, but perhaps having a little bit of thinking in advance of what you're looking for can kind of tailor your questions, right? So you might have a very specific ask or a comment on a paper or something that you've seen that can help it feel a bit more comfortable.
I never thought about it that way. Actually, for me, it's just, I always start interacting through the science, right?
Yeah.
That has always been my approach.
Yeah.
Not having anything, I'm interested in the science, so I start talking to people, right? Not having it, another goal, right? But it turns out that eventually, you remember this and you are, thinking about a problem and you say, oh, that's the person that I should actually go back to, right? Yeah.
Well, that's perfect. I don't want to
Amina, you have
because, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, please.
I just saw that Amina had her hand raised.
Yes. I just wanted to, there are some questions in the chat box, so we'll get to those questions shortly. I wanted to make a comment, which I really appreciate these different approaches to how mentoring is viewed and so on. I do want to highlight something very important that may not be relevant to students in the audience and so on. And it certainly wasn't something I imagined in my life. So when I joined Lucia's lab, who's one of our panelists, I didn't know that, that was in 2000 when I joined Lucia's lab. And I actually was a summer research student in her lab when I was an undergraduate. So I first met Lucia as an undergraduate on a summer research experience. And at that time, I also didn't know that she would be my PhD advisor and that I would actually make it to University of Chicago for a PhD program. And but what I want to say is there are sometimes life is going to take you places that you just don't know. And the people that you meet, so this is back, I joined Lucia's lab in 2000. I was a summer intern in 1999. And then now in 2021, I am in a place where I am inviting my former mentor, who is still my mentor. It's kind of weird to say former mentor, and invite her to a conference that I get to chair. And then Rabia, who is here, she was my classmate. We started PhD together in 2000. And now in 2021, I can write a message to Rabia, we can connect on Zoom, and we mentor actually each other. So even though we were classmates, we can still, we talk to each other, we give each other advice. And so people you know in your cohort, it's not always that mentor is somebody who is ahead of you career-wise. It can be somebody who is with you in the same situation, same struggles, same things, taking biophysics together, struggling with this or that, life problems and so on. So mentoring is people around you in general, and you never know who you're gonna meet 15 years later, who you're gonna ask for a letter, who you're gonna do this or that. So keep your bridges open. Don't always, and like I never imagined, Nikki was in my lab. I think you defended your thesis in 2011 and a master's thesis, and 10 years later, Nikki's here being a moderator. So there's a whole family tree here. Like Rabia and I are science sisters. Lucia is my science mom, and Nikki is my science daughter and sort of granddaughter of Lucia's. And it's kind of strange how that goes around. And I just want to bring this up because it's kind of unimaginable. I never, ever imagined this to be this way, and it really is. So keep your bridges open, and they will take you places that you never know. And you never know when you have to go back or forward or take another route at a different intersection. So that's something I wanted to share. So we do have some great questions in the chat box, and I want to encourage in particular students to really take advantage of this opportunity and ask any questions you wish about career, what different science careers we have, and so on. So I want to encourage you to do this. Okay, so Rabia had a comment about what Lucia shared, a network before you have a specific need, it can be critical. And when a question arises, you already have a connection to build on. That's a good point. I want to start with a question to Leslie, actually, who is our one student who is currently pursuing her PhD. And Leslie was also a MARC scholar, which is a NIH MARC grant, is in part funding this conference. And the question to Leslie was, how important do you think it is to do extracurricular activities during grad school? Or there are any specific activities that you would suggest?
Yes, I think that it's really important to take time for yourself as a student, because grad school, there's always work. Something, a good mentor, her name is Dr. Tony Gutierrez, an immunologist from Northeastern, who still keeps in touch with me. When I was involved in SACNAS at Northeastern and EIU, I met her there at various regional conferences, and she told me, there will always, for an example, there will always be mice. But what about your health? What about your happiness? And so I really thought about that. There will always be work, but I think it's important to prioritize. That's one skill that I think with at NEIU really helps, time management and juggling various extracurricular activities, such as being involved in different societies, whether it be SACNAS or something within your desired field, like the Society of Genetics, for example. One thing that I personally, the higher I go in my studies, in some regard, the lonelier I feel to my Latino community. And this is why, for example, I took advantage of an email opportunity that Chicago Chek sent while I was a student in Iowa. It was to volunteer at a health fair at a park, McKinley Park on the southwest side, where nearby where I grew up in back of the yards. And it was a health fair for Black and Brown residents. And I thought, yeah, I'm tired. I'll be tired at the end of the week, but I want to do this. So I took the 6-hour Greyhound bus into Chicago to come volunteer to that event. And I got to translate and give resources to these underserved, I would say, community members. And that made me feel whole. That made me feel reconnected again. Because in regard with Dr. Mayes was saying about outreach, I kind of get the sense, at least when talking to my family, they don't really understand what I do as much as I explain it. And I don't know, especially nowadays with social media and right now the current vaccine rollout, there is mistrust. And I've tried my best to I've convinced 3 people so far to get the vaccine after showing them that I got it and I trusted the science. And things like that, outreach, talking about what I do in a simple manner to them. And that makes me feel complete and connected with people that, for example, didn't have the opportunity to pursue this kind of education that I've been privileged with. I'm a daughter of immigrants. My dad completed a 2nd grade education. So it's really important for me. I say good morning, good afternoon to people I see on the street. I want to be friendly. I want to meet any people from any avenue of life. And so currently right now at UIC, one thing that in the College of Medicine we seem to have an issue with is student culture, because it's a commuter school. A lot of graduate students recently, it was identified in a survey that they're not happy. They're not happy. And so I got invited to be on a graduate student advising working group that's recognized by the College of Medicine. And we're trying to brainstorm ways to actually build or reestablish a community at UIC for the students, because there are some studies that say suggest that happiness can be related to productivity. So I'm really, really hoping that we can have some change at UIC. It's a start, but I really do feel being connected, not just within your school, but also outside of your school, is really, really important.
Leslie, thank you for sharing your comments with us and talking about, some of the advocacy and outreach work you're doing both in your community and UIC. I think that's wonderful that you're engaging in this level as a trainee. So I want to go ahead, and we've got a couple of questions in the chat box. And I think this is another one that I'd like to, while it was directed towards Lucia, I think this is something that I'd love to hear your answers. And we'll start with Michelle on this one, and we'll everybody can jump in. Who is your mentor or mentors? As typically, it's really great to have a collective of mentors. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, who is a mentor to you in your mentoring, roundtable?
That's a great question. That's a great question, because you're right. I'm outside of the sciences now, but that I have mentors that are still my former colleagues, former friends, my current colleagues, old professors. They're still my mentors. Family members. There's a lot of different people that make up a mentor. And I liked who was saying about, I think Amelia, how mentors are friends or colleagues or former work, people that you've worked with before or went to school with before, because you're going through the same thing. So, you're bouncing off ideas with each other, always trying to brainstorm. Brainstorming is so much fun, and that's so important. And to be able to do that with people who know you. And I think that's the key, if you have a mentor, they have to know a little bit about you, about your background, about what your desires are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, So I would say there's a lot of people, that are mentors, and a mentor doesn't necessarily mean somebody that you need to talk to all the time or that you have to ask. Sometimes it's just following the career path or reading the papers of what a mentor is doing, so that is nice too. For instance, I have some former professors that I really, really admire, and seeing what they have done and what they have done, what publications they're doing, if they're anti-Canada antibody, for instance. This is a former mentor of mine. If he finally was able to get it into production, into the pharmaceutical companies, that was that's interesting. So you can follow mentors digitally. What I mean digitally is by seeing what their publication is, where they're going. So there's lots of mentors all around you, and Jolie, for instance, I would consider even a mentor, just because it was nice to reconnect with her when I moved back to Chicago. I was living in Arizona with this company, and then I had moved here to work remotely to help with my parents. So that was one of the benefits. That's one of the benefits of working in the patent world. If you have your computer, you can work, So it was just really nice reconnecting with her and just discussing, what we have done in our careers and where we're going in our careers. So, yeah. So it doesn't have to be a professor. It doesn't have to be somebody much higher than you. You know, it can be someone on your path at your age, or even younger might, you know.
Oh, well, thank you for the shout out, Michelle.
Sure, it's true. You know, you've been really helpful.
Yi, what about your mentors? Has that changed being in industry, how you identify mentors?
Yeah, I think, you know, I really very specifically identify mentors to help me with different areas. You know, I have specific mentors who help me navigate the organization, mentors that help me work through a problem, a scientific problem. And most recently, my Ball State intern, who's 23 years old, is schooling my whole lab on having that fearless attitude in science, not being neurotic and being fearful about doing the next experiment. So, you know, it's really looking for somebody who can show you the way.
Lucia, what was it like? Did you have mentors, and how was that, seeing as how you know, you were really a trailblazer, as you mentioned, when molecular biology wasn't even a common thing. It wasn't, you taught the first course. Did you have challenges finding mentors, being one of the few women in your field at that time?
So I consider I had three, in my career, three mentors. First, my PhD advisor, who, you know, that was in Leloir's Institute. Then when I came to the States, Bob Martin, an amazing bacterial geneticist, that's where I learned bacterial genetics. And then when I moved to the University of Chicago, I thought I was going to have one, and this person left. I think we overlapped for 3 months, but those 3 months were very important. So when I moved to the University of Chicago, I found it a very rarefied atmosphere, okay? I felt out of this environment. It was very stratified, right? And, you know, where you were was, you know, they treat you in a different way. It was, you know, so I had a mentor during that period, and that was my postdoctoral mentor, Bob Martin. And then I realized that, so we always discussed science, right? But I realized that I was interacting with him every week, and that interaction every week, I realized that Bob Martin was being my psychiatrist. It wasn't so much about the science, it was about the environment. It was really interesting. And then from there on, so one of the attractions, I didn't want to move to Chicago, but my husband decided. I was the one who decided to come to the States, and then, you know, this was his step to make a decision. And so I was very excited because there was someone that I thought would be a fantastic colleague. We overlapped for 3 to 6 months, and actually his name is Peter Gajdusz. He's retired now. He had been, he was in Chicago, and then he moved to CSD. He's retired, but he has an office at Stanford. He's so much valued, you know, in terms of his brain. Peter must be 80 something, but he, in terms of my science, since I started in my lab, he has been my mentor. Both him and his wife are like adoptive parents for me. Yeah, but in the science, he has been crucial. If I didn't have a whole day every year to discuss science with him, which we would do it at a meeting every year, I felt that I had missed something. Yeah. But that is absolutely crucial. Yeah. I was very lucky.
Rabia, what about you and your mentors?
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of the comments that were made around having kind of a broad, diverse group of mentors. I will say that I came to thinking about mentoring a little late in the game. And so I would say when I was in graduate school, I certainly didn't seek out mentors. I absolutely had them. I don't know at the time, that is how I kind of recognize them, right? So sometimes you have these kind of mentors who are actually mentoring, but you haven't necessarily identified it until years later. I will say though, and I say this often, that when I was choosing a lab for my graduate work, I was very clear about the fact that I could do a wide range of science. My science interests were really broad, and I felt confident that I could find something that I loved. What I recognized fully, though, we're 21, and I didn't know a whole lot about anything, is that you would be embarking on the longest term relationship of your life to date, right? I wasn't married, I wasn't in a long-term partnership. So outside of my family, my research advisor was going to be like the kind of longer term relationship for some time. And that was really important to me. And at that stage of my life and kind of the person that I am, I knew that that was actually more important than the science, right? Like I could figure out the science and love it, but I needed to have a relationship with that person. And so I would say that was probably the first intentional decision that I made around mentorship and choosing a PI. And that's not the right approach for everybody, but I know for me that it was. I did ultimately end up loving the science, which, shout out, was about mRNA, which is kind of making a comeback. So I think that taught me the value of seeking out people to be kind of in your sphere and in your life in a mentoring capacity, because I think when you're thoughtful about it and choose it well, the dividends are incredible. And so as I've continued in my career, like some of the others have shared, I definitely have kind of mentoring all over the place. And I have learned that not everybody needs to be, nor should be, your like whole mentor, right? So there's some people who I go to for mentorship about leadership, right? I have a staff of about 100 people, and developing my leadership skills has been incredibly important to me because my staff success is depending on my ability to lead and support them, right? And so there are people who I really value their leadership skills, but maybe they don't have science or other things that I need. And so I get that other places. I will say that kind of today, my network community is a combination of probably fewer scientists than there used to be, so that makes me a little sad, but people who've been in the museum field for a long time. There are amazing women running science museums and science centers across the country who I've reached out to, who have been incredibly valuable to me in helping me understand how to navigate this kind of space and how to do that successfully and with equity at the forefront, and how to do that as a woman. I have had mentors who I have learned from because of what they don't do well. So I want to kind of give a shout out to the kind of accidental mentors that teach you how you want to be different from what you've seen. That's been a helpful study. And I kind of accumulate mentors kind of every couple of days. So I will meet somebody and be like, can I stay in touch with you about this, right? So my language is less about, I need you to be my mentor. I think that's really formal. Probably not all of us do that all the time, but it's like, I really appreciate the way you've approached this particular issue or how you've communicated in this way. Could we stay in touch about, this over time? And that has led to some really fruitful conversations with people across the country and the world who I check in with, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once a year. But I feel really privileged to have figured out a system, I think, that works really well.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you for sharing your experiences on that.
Can I just say something, Nicole? I want to agree with what Rabia had said, and you had said something just now that I was like, yeah, that's true. I have to remember who our audience is today, right now, right? And it's students, right? So when I was a student, when I thought of a mentor, I always thought of some older professor that's going to guide me, or you choose one person that's going to guide you through the way. But that's really not how life works. It might be a little bit more at your level, but as you get older, you're always having mentors, and that age difference and that level of education and experience kind of diminishes a little bit, right? And you equal out with your mentor, what you consider, but you don't consider them mentors. Like you might I would say don't be so caught up on the idea of like, oh, I have to find a mentor that's going to guide me in my career. It's really not, look for people around you that that can help you with specific things, right? And it's not one person that is going to carry you through your career and always be there necessarily.
So I'm gonna jump to, and we're gonna finish up kind of this topic on mentorship with the question in the chat, and I'll frame it like this: that You know, over the course of this past year that we've been in the pandemic, there's a lot of emerging evidence to show that women have really been impacted, particularly by the pandemic in multiple ways, particularly within the STEM science and medicine workforce. So the question was, you know, do you think it benefits you to have a woman mentor in your life? Not necessarily your PhD advisor, but to have women mentors. Are there aspects of that that are an essential component to you in your daily lives and careers?
We tend to gravitate towards people like us, so in your immediate mentor circle, it could be people who have your same personality, people that you identify with, but it's also equally important to actively seek out mentorship in people who don't look like you, who do not have the same experiences as you, so that you might understand how some of your own biases might be self-limiting, and just to get that different perspective.
Any other comments or thoughts? That's very good. That's a very good perspective for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts?
That's a really, really good, that's a really good perspective. I think when I threw that question out there, one of the reasons I put that out there was, would that be able to attract more women to STEM and actually help with retaining women in STEM? Because I think what happens a lot is that women, they go through graduate school and they kind of get to a certain point, and maybe that point is, where do I stay and try to run my own lab, or do I seek out an alternative career? So I just was wondering if having maybe almost an assigned female mentor to help navigate some of the more troublesome aspects of academics or the work environment for a woman would help with retention. So.
Yeah, having allies is what helps, right? So maybe, when you seek out somebody, I had my postdoc advisor, he was male and, clearly came from a culture where, he could speak up. And when I didn't speak up, he couldn't understand why. And that opened my eyes to the fact that I was limiting myself. And, some of my mentors may not have pointed it out because we were just not people to speak up.
I was I was a member of the Association of Women in Science back in when I was a postdoc, and I did find it very helpful. We would have networking events or just speakers come in, and I did like to see that. I thought it was important to speak with people who would say, well, why can't you do that? Of course you can, or here's an alternative, because you always come up with like, but, I like to do this, but, or this is going to, this blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so I think that having exposure to women mentors is important, especially when they can help navigate, you through different hangups that you might have.
I think I would just add that so I speak for myself here, but I absolutely know that I'm not unique, right? Many of us wear different masks or shields or whatever you want to call it, right, in different environments. And so there are times I think that for a lot of women, being able to take off whatever the mask is that tends to be kind of forced by kind of gendered environments, right? So whether it's your guard is always up because you're not sure if someone's going to think of you a certain way, or if there's a kind of gendered competition, or someone's talking over you all the time, or you feel like someone might take your ideas. There is something really powerful, I think, about being able to lay that weight down in a community of women, and just feel as though there's a common thread, a commonality that you can connect with. And so I think to the earlier point, this idea of the communities with which you identify, whether that's racial, cultural, language, gender, having mentors who have some alignment with you in that space can be so powerful, even if only to allow you to just lay the burden down of having to be all of these other things in the other environments. And again, I don't know that everybody has that experience, but I know a lot of us do. And so sometimes mentorship is really powerful in creating the space for allowing us to just do that.
Okay, so I'd like to Amina, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Rabia for bringing that point up. I actually wanted to share exactly the same thing, and just thank panelists for this great discussion. And I think it's really important that you have mentors, a diverse group of mentors. But I do want to say that having a woman mentor can make a difference in some ways. I mean, I would lie if I would say that when I was a PhD student in biochemistry department, that it didn't bother me that there was one female faculty member in the entire department when we started in 2000, in a way, and that was shocking, and it really shocked me actually. And all my members of my prelim committee were men when I was doing my initial thesis evaluation. And so I would say that, you know, I cannot say that didn't matter. It was kind of, wow, why is this like this? And I think it mattered so much to me to see Lucia move ahead, like she was chairing meetings. She had so many leadership roles, and it made me believe that I could do the same. Like I felt like, oh, here is somebody I can identify with. And I thought it inspired me that, wow, she's doing all of this, so I ought to do it. And I remember when I was pregnant, expecting my first child, and I thought it was tough back then to be a PhD student and be pregnant. And then I remember Lucia sharing her experiences of motherhood and being a faculty member. And at a time when there were so few rules about, you know, family leave and so on, and how she managed her career and her parenting. And I thought, oh my God, how can I even complain when back then these were the things that were going on? So we have an important history, and it gets kind of passed on generations, and that history can be inspirational, and it can also teach us what we can do better for the future. So anyway, just a little point there to bring up. So thanks.
So I want to make a comment in terms of myself. I never had a woman mentor. Actually, you know, I mentioned Peter Gajduszek, they were males. But, you know, I realized, I thought about it and how did I handle it? And I realized that my mentor in that sense had been my mother. My mother graduated in the first class of the School of Nutritionists in Argentina. My father was one of the founders of the School of Nutritionists. And actually, she worked all the time. And she did a lot of research, and actually, so I should say I was the first, and a year later came the second daughter, and then a year and a half later the third, and that's when they stopped. But my mother never quit working. I must say that the situation in Argentina was very different, because there was my mother's aunt. She was like our grandmother, who constantly lived in her own place but came every day home, and there was help at home. And actually, I told my husband, we are not going to have kids until actually we're settled, because I'm not going to go back. He wanted to go back to Argentina. 2 months after I came to NIH, I had decided I was staying here in the States. And so at one point, actually, I said to my husband, we need someone living in. And that's because it had happened at home. I had an example of how to deal with that. Yeah. And that was actually, I wouldn't have been able to go to meetings, you know, with ended up having 2 kids, whom are my best friends. But yeah. It was my mother.
That's a really wonderful sentiment. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's tremendous that you can call upon your mother as your mentor and role model in that sense. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So we've talked about mentorship, networking, community building. I'd like to kind of talk about your different career paths and the different jobs you've held. So just, coming from some of the questions in the chat. So let's start. If you had to pick, what is the best thing about your job? What do you love the most about your job? What excites you? What gets you excited to go to work in the morning?
For me, the science, okay? I started with a system and we've developed it with my lab, in a really very, very nice way. And so I should have retired quite some time ago. And the only reason I'm around is because I want to do one last monster experiment, right? Which I'm going to do in collaboration with someone in Copenhagen. There have been some problems lately with the material that I have to use. This is a very different story. But it's, that's it. It's answering a question which has never been answered. That's it, right? That's what I've been doing. Yeah. That's what drives me.
From a student perspective, what drives me to get up every morning, even though I'm very exhausted from the day-to-day, juggling working from home, and also the time in lab and also classes, has been quite an experience during this pandemic. But what drives me, that little spark, for example, it started at Northeastern. I worked in a lab in a closet. I started volunteering in a lab in a closet. Our mice cages were kept in a closet, and I got to study something phenomenal process, mouse pregnancy and outcomes in the mouse pup babies. And one professor, Dr. Vargas, she used to be an advisor at the Student Center for Science Engagement. She had this interesting quote that a mother is like a vessel and the fetus is like a parasite. And that sounds really gory, but I was fascinated how a body, whether it be a human or a mouse, could provide this nutrition for the growing baby. And so when I graduated from NEIU, I wanted to study pregnancy. And so I did in my post-bac prep program. And then I moved on to a different mentor for my second year. And I got to work with one of 3 female faculty in the Department of Pharmacology at Iowa. Her name was Dr. Ann Quiddick. And from her, I learned unspoken rules about being a woman in science. I saw how she was just fearless. She just went for it. And I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to seeing that. And so nowadays, what gets me up in the morning is that spark again, that spark that when I go into the lab, there's something waiting for me. There's a question waiting for me. I get to work with my hands. It might not work out. I might get frustrated, but I get to try again. And then there's these really special moments that I can't really put very eloquently into words, but when I'm on, let's say, a microscope and I'm doing an immunofluorescence staining of a thin piece of a mouse brain, and I get to see these neuroimmune cells, they look like little spiders, they're called microglia. When I see that and in the network with the neurons, it's just a beautiful moment. The colors, the vibrancy, the fact that I get to see this on my own. I get to work on this. It's a very special feeling that I can't explain. And then also I get to work with undergraduate students from the UAC Honors College. And one day I was an undergraduate at Northeastern, and I had so many mentors from the TAs or whatnot. And it feels really fulfilling that you could have a change in someone's life just on a day-to-day basis. Whether it be teaching someone how to pipette for the first time, that's I feel great.
I feel inspired just attending. I just hearing all of what you've shared so far. Michelle, you have a comment.
I do. First of all, I know what Leslie's talking about. You know, when you're looking in the microscope and you're like, it's the first time my eyes are the first human eyes that have ever seen this happening, for instance. You know, it's so exciting. You know, I'm an immunologist too, or I work with immune. So yeah, science is fascinating. But in the patent world, what I love about getting up, or I loved about getting up every morning, was making sure, well, a couple things. Making sure that the science was accurate. So as a reviewer and as the trainer and the quality control, I had to analyze and look at our analysts' patent write-up. So how our company did it was you would have a brand new patent application. So an analyst would get a patent application and they'd have to analyze the patent itself, break it down, understand the science, and then search for prior art on it, and then write a written opinion, right? So I would analyze those and ensure them for accuracy. So you have to be careful for the accuracy of the science, the interpretation of the application itself. If they found the best prior art, which is, you know, that's searching, you know, for prior art, and then how they wrote it up, you know. And it's not just black and white. It's not, yes, it's novel, or no, it's novel. There's area of interpretation, and that's like where you can say, wow, well, there's like inventive step. Like, would it have been obvious to have created, or to have created this product based on the prior art? So that's where your science comes in. You're expert in the field. You know, Jones publishes this and Smith publishes this. Would it have been obvious to have combined Jones and Smith to have created that, you know, to have developed this product? And so that's a lot of fun to make sure it's right, you know. And it's not just fun, but it's important, you know, because there's so much money that rides on patents and years of development of products. So the accuracy of what's going out is really important. So that's fun. And then also, as if you're doing a case, reviewing a case, it's like you're opening up a brand new package every day. You know, it's like, ooh, what am I going to see now? And what is this new invention? And what can I search for? And, you know, has it been shown before? It's like a hunt every day, you know. So that is something that I really enjoyed about my work. You know? So I'll stop there.
I'll be brief and just say that I get up every day because I know that the work that we are doing is helping young people in particular, for whom every narrative tells them that they cannot, that science is not for them, that you are too fill in the blank, poor, low grade, in the wrong zip code, have the wrong skin color, parents don't have the right jobs, right? That the narrative created for them by this society tells them that they cannot and they are less than and they will not, and that our work is actively challenging and turning that notion on its head so that young people feel that science is something that is for them, that it is in them, that they are capable and deserving, and can pursue whatever they want to using science. That's the stuff that gets me teary. I cry probably once a week because of the kind of impact that I think that we're having, and because we know what young people are out there experiencing in the world. It is a traumatic world for a lot of kids. And so I think for our institution to be a place that supports fun and creativity, but also really credible science experiences and pathways into science, every day, it makes the boring meetings and the proposal writing and the difficult conversations completely worth it. I do miss the lab. I miss waking up at 6:30 at data, like looking at data and then texting my PI and all of that. But this is a pretty close second.
Yi, would you like to add anything?
Well, I work in teams now, so you know, I like it when people email me data. But really, what I enjoy now is because we work in teams. You know, you have to convince other scientists to work on the problem that you're interested in, and being able to draw out that different perspective. You know, how do you merge what the patient is experiencing, what you can measure in the clinic, what kind of a bioinformatics data you have to the biology that you want, and then trying to tell the people who make your reagents to QC it so that, you know, everything that we work with, you know, has been mass spec. We know exactly what we have in our hands. You know, that whole process, it's like creating a symphony, right? And you get all these players and artisans to be so careful in their work. And then when it all comes together, you know, there is some beauty in that. And that's what I work towards.
Thank you. Those are all phenomenal responses. And this is why, as a student, I loved attending these career panels, because every time I would hear somebody share about their experiences, it just really helped me connect with what they're doing, and it gave me opportunities to see that there are a variety of different things you can do with your PhD training or graduate education. And so along those lines, with you know, with your variety of different careers, not being entirely at the bench, you know, I'm not entirely at the bench. I'm a biochemist, but I'm not at the bench anymore. What have been some of the what can you share with students about maybe key transferable skills that you've learned that, you know, you were pipetting, you know, doing ELISAs, doing Western blots. Okay, that's great. But how can you take those skill sets and the things you've learned in your graduate training and career that have kind of come over to your day-to-day now?
So I like to go first and say, you know, it's really about the thinking skills that you acquire. You know, before you plan the experiment, do you know what the outcome should be? You know, what is scenario A versus scenario B, and then the surprise scenario, right? And then, you know, being able to synthesize the information that you have, and then, you know, being able to communicate that. That whole communication piece and that presentation piece is our number one, you know, transferable skill, I think.
I would say streamlining, like really cutting out the garbage, which is what you in graduate school, you know, you really, you know, a PhD is a degree in thinking, right? And so it's complex problem solving, critical thinking, you know, and really cutting out the nonsense, right? And so that's a skill that you can definitely, you know, transfer in, that I've taken and transferred. Analysis and assessment, right? So really using, you know, the thinking skills that, you know, that you really develop, that you hone, you know, during, you know, your graduate degree. And those are very real. I mean, it's, you know, that sounds like a bizarre skill, but it's a very real skill, you know, and you can definitely bring it with you, you know, analysis, critical thinking, being able to write, but write scientifically, you know, not with a lot of thought. I mean, just like being technical writing, you know, that you bring with you for sure as well. Being able to speak objectively about things without a lot of feeling and thought, you know, just that helps as well, because, you know, in the workforce, it's, you know, you're trying to get something done. So it's a lot of objectivity and humanitarian skills are very important, of course, because it's how you deal with people. But to actually get something done, you know, you need a lot of objectivity, and that that is developed through STEM careers as well. Muting.
I would say getting comfortable with communicating. I think that was one of the things that originally, when I started as a biology major at Northeastern, I was terrified of presentations, terrified of getting up in front of a classroom. And I think I've heard on the news somewhere that public speaking is the second biggest fear after death, which is number one. But I think as a student and still right now as a trainee, public speaking skills are very, very important to communicate your science, not just within your lab group or within your school or department, but also when you branch out at conferences, or if you're trying to write a proposal, for example, like Sigma Xi or whatnot. What my professor, his advice to me was practice, practice, practice. It sounds corny, but timing yourself, writing out a script beforehand and memorizing what you're going to say, writing out potential questions that you might anticipate from the audience, and that should hopefully help you feel a little less nervous and more comfortable when it's actually showtime, and it'll feel more natural, hopefully.
I added a shameless plug into the chat box along those lines that you've all mentioned communication as being a key transferable skill. And a lot of you come from, biology, biochemistry backgrounds. The American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology offers a communication course that I'm happy to lead and be a part of. So that provides a place outside of your institution where you're at, that you can meet with others and work on your science communication skills, particularly geared towards communication with non-experts, which is something we've both Leslie and Rabia have talked about as being central to the work that they're doing, communicating our science to broader audiences. Okay, well, these have been really great experiences so far. We've kind of talked about career paths, mentorship. I'd love to hear if there are other questions from the audience today, and particularly from some of our students. But while we wait in the chat for people to plug those in or raise their hands, I would love to ask another question. If you could go back to talk to yourself as a student, be it undergraduate or graduate school, what would be the one piece of advice you would share with your former self, knowing everything that you know today?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Nicole? One important thing I should say is being good with technology. And I just lost the screen for a couple seconds and stopped paying attention. But technology and being comfortable with technology is something that you bring along with you as well. So.
If you could go back and talk to yourself as a student, either undergraduate or graduate, what is the one piece of advice you would give yourself, knowing everything that you know today?
I can answer that. I would say to not be so self-critical, to think about things more objectively, to be more. I was very much of a perfectionist, so it's either all or nothing. So if I wasn't the best, then I wasn't good enough, right? So that's just so not true. And that comes a lot with women, because you think you have to be the best to be competing, right? And that's so not true. There are, all different levels of understanding of different things. You don't have to know everything all the time, right? You develop knowledge as you go, and it builds. And so that's something that would be really helpful, I think, for an undergrad to understand. It's a development process, and you're not all or nothing.
I would say that it's okay to ask for help. I think that for me, getting rid of the shame and the horrible thoughts that, oh, I'm the dumbest person in this class, for example. No, someone else might have the same question and they might be scared to raise their hand. And so if you ask for the help from your professor or from your PI or guidance counselor, you can get that help. And then you'll move up a step on the ladder, for example. You can only go up, I think, if you reach out for help. But if you don't ask for help, you're going to stay at the same step unless you bang your head against the wall and try to figure it out on your own. But that might be the more frustrating route. It might help you grow too, some resilience. But I think for me, getting over the fear of saying, I don't know this, being honest, I don't know this, I'm afraid to mess this up. Can you explain it to me step by step, for example? I think that's been very helpful for me and helped me grow too, because it reinforces not to be scared, I think, to ask for help.
So I think, I echo what Michelle had said, should we, the whole black and white thinking is really unhealthy. And, to kind of divorce the failure of the bench from your self-image, just because you failed on the bench doesn't mean that, you're a failure. And, the other piece would be that, even as the proposal was written by your PI, science changes, things change, don't get too hung up on sticking to the one question you were told to answer, but be really focused on what a good question is, but not in the exact way that you execute it.
Would anyone else like to comment?
I totally agree with what you just said. Asking the right question is often so much more important than getting the answer. You asking the right question, and that comes with experience and development as well in graduate school. So that's a very good skill to have and hone.
And I know I'm not a panelist, but I might chime in here. One thing I would have told my younger self while I was going through my PhD and stuff like that would be flexible. Because at the time that I was going through all that, I wasn't really open to the idea of alternative careers, and I didn't really know a lot about alternative careers. And so I just felt intense feelings of like failure and imposter syndrome in trying to kind of ultimately become a PI of a laboratory. And it just was never really a good fit for me to begin with. And so in just being flexible to sort of different experiences, for example, during my postdoc where I was working with Yi Ting out in Southern California, I had the tremendous experience of being funded actually by a really wealthy woman in Beverly Hills who wanted to support a woman in cancer research. And because of that, I got to do so many cool things. I got to go to all these fundraising functions and just speak off the cuff about cervical cancer, which is what I studied, and just help people answer questions and things like that. And that opened up just like a whole new way of thinking about things for me and kind of led me down the path of more science education. So just be flexible and take any of those extra experiences that you can, really, because you never know what you're going to learn from it.
Okay, I'm gonna just jump in, and we've talked about the different career paths, and today I've heard alternative career, the dark side of industry. I just want to reinforce the concept that these careers, it's just a career. Everything is a career in science, and just because somebody doesn't go into the professoriate, such as Lucia, and become a National Academy member, doesn't mean that these roles are any less valuable. And I think that's something that Michelle was speaking to, that I think a lot, because where you train as a PhD student, all you see are faculty. Now that's changing a bit, but back even 5-10 years ago, those were your mentors, those were your examples of what success looks like. And I think what I hope the students take from this panel today is that success looks very different and can be different ways and spaces in science. So going with a question from the chat, did you ever face any doubts while going for a PhD? And if so, how did you manage to move past those doubts?
So because I took a very long time in grad school, towards the end, I was starting to get burnt out, and eventually, I went to my PI. I was like, this is my School of Beauty, Marinello School of Beauty application to become a makeup artist. I need a way out, or this is where I'm going. And I think that conversation helped to refocus us on, what key experiments needed to be done and how I needed to refocus what we were working on in order to get me out. So having that frank conversations of where you are at and whether the experiments are where they should be, regular check-ins with the PI is always a good idea.
I would say, besides the every other day, like looking at alternative jobs and how much you can make doing this or doing that or blah, blah, blah. I would say, no. Aside from that, when you're just like, oh, I'm so done with this position. No, I loved it. I adored graduate school. I adored learning the science. I loved it. Science has always been like a touchstone for me. I like to explore different things, but what I liked about hard science is that it's hard science and it's real and it's precise. And if you can tell by my conversations today, I really like that, right? I like accuracy. So I loved graduate school. And I loved my postdoc. It was really exciting. Science is so much fun. It's so exciting, and to jump back to what you were saying about alternative careers, you're so right. And you can tell by, I'm 48 right now. And just several years ago, I was president of the Postdoctoral Association, and we had alternative careers, right? And that was the normal. That was what we brought in, and that was that was 7 years ago. 7 years ago only. So like the way the definitions now and our terms are changing, and I'm so happy to see that. I'm happy that you brought that up, Nicole. It's really important.
I want to share
Any of the other panelists.
Yeah, it's not particularly strategic. I didn't have another plan. Right. So I was committed to grad school, and there were definitely times when I wanted to give up, but I literally did not have another plan. And it was important to me. Perhaps it was pride. Maybe it was kind of pressure from my network and my mentors who were really encouraging me. But to some extent, I've run marathons and trained for triathlons, and there's this kind of energy around like, I'm going to finish. Right. And so I think what I ended up needing to do when I felt there were two specific times, and I liken it to mile 18 for me in the marathon. That's when I hit the wall. I always cry. I usually call my mother. It's super embarrassing, but it's that moment where you're like, I don't think I can do this. And I had two of those kind of periods in graduate school. And I took a step back and realized that I just needed to engage differently. And I leaned on my network, right? And talked to my family, who reminded me who I was and what I could do. And I talked to my mentors, and they reminded me that you can do it. But I want to be really clear that sometimes it's like, that's the finish line because I didn't have anything else on the plan, right? And so I'm not embarrassed to say that. I just think sometimes that's true. And sometimes that's what gets you to the finish and gets you to the space where then you can think about what's next.
That's great. I also did not, I didn't know what else I would do. And I think at some point we become so specialized. Perhaps the transition to Dr. Church's plan for hotel management and interior design, we'd be having to start over if we were going to be a baker or a makeup artist. But, you know, thank you guys for sharing those experiences with us. You know, I think one of the things that I'd like to highlight for students is really, this has just been themes of resiliency as well. And really just, you know, moving forward, you know, accepting imperfections, and really just pushing forward to do the things that you ultimately want to do and that bring you joy. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I'd like to hear, is there anything from the panelists? Is there something that I didn't ask today that you think that you would like the students to really know and take home from your experiences?
Hi Nicole, it's Michelle again. Nothing really that, except that I feel like I didn't really describe much of the world of patents as an alternative career. And I probably don't have that much time to do it, but if anybody's interested in it and wants to actually discuss what that's all about and how it works, you know, they're definitely welcome to reach out to me after this. You can share my email, I'm fine with that, or my contact information. And I could just discuss, you know, discuss that career choice in a little more detail.
Okay, that's actually a great comment, because then if anybody would like to share their contact information or email in the chat, that would be phenomenal. I'll put my information there as well in case anybody wants to get in touch. Any other questions for the panelists today?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to acknowledge that I think the last 10 years, and certainly the last year with the pandemic, has certainly put a spotlight on much more broadly the importance of really taking care of mental health. And I think that one of the things that certainly when I was in grad school was sort of expected, it's going to be hard, it's challenging, it's long. I think there's also this underlying notion that, like, if you're suffering, that's part of the deal, right? Like that's just the nature of this kind of work. It's really hard. You should be struggling. You should suffer. And I've been really grateful to see the shift in the landscape, where there's much more attention being called to the graduate and undergraduate as well, but the graduate student experience in particular as it relates to mental health, and making sure that that's prioritized, and that students feel that they can advocate for themselves and have advocates for them. Because yes, graduate school is challenging. It's tough work. Being a scientist is really hard. It shouldn't be equated with suffering. And so if people are really struggling in ways beyond what they can manage, I would just encourage everybody to just, you know, continue with the momentum of what we've learned in the pandemic about self-care and reaching out for support. That's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. There's been, you know, some recent research that shows that graduate students, you know, have, you know, are facing depression and anxiety, and this particularly is more focused on students who may be underrepresented in STEM fields to begin with. So I think, thank you for bringing that important point up. Any other
Hi,
Dr. Church.
Sorry, can everyone hear me? Okay, good. Sorry, I've been listening to everyone's wonderful comments, and I tend to talk a lot, so I didn't really want to interrupt, but I do want to say this one thing. I'm a psychologist, and psychology is a STEM science, as it turns out, because we understand the science of how the mind works. One of the things that can really get in the way of doing well and feeling good about what you're doing is cognitive load. When we have too many things on our mind, we're feeling emotional, we're feeling judged, we're trying to do science, we're trying to think. So it's really important for I think, as Rabia pointed out, to have a good life balance among things. And I was teasing, but it was true. I was looking into hotel management and interior design. It's important to have a hobby. It's important to have something outside of the science that you enjoy doing. It gives you a break. Think about the original scientists. The original scientists all did something in art. They were artists, they played instruments, they wrote poetry. It's a combination of things that really helps our brains work the way they're supposed to work to be creative and innovative. So, you know, that's one thing. You need work-life balance. And the other thing is persistence. You just have to be persistent. If this career has taught me nothing, it's taught me to be persistent and dogged in the things I believe in, even if it means hard work. Even if you don't make it in science or decide to do something different, you have to be persistent. And pretty much everything you have to do, and it's particularly true of women. We have had to just hang in there when no one else believed that we could do what we can do. So persistence is really important. The ability to be flexible and to pivot is also important. So those are just 3 elements that I think people have to remember. And that's it.
Thank you. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Well, I know we're approaching the close of the hour, and I would just like to take this moment to thank all of our panelists for attending today and sharing of their experiences. I am so grateful to be among the company of these phenomenal women in science, and I appreciated learning from each of you today. It's always energizing for me to hear from you and of your experiences, and the really just the joy you find in your day-to-day helps re-energize me. And I have to say, I asked you what brings you joy to your careers. I would have to say, this brings me joy, the ability to do these things and to help other women advance and succeed in science. That's why I get up in the morning. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to Northeastern for hosting this event, Chicago Czech, the organizers. We very much appreciate your attendance today, and I will turn it over to the co-chairs for concluding remarks.
Nikki, I just want to make a really quick shameless plug for our next Women in Science event. So we're actually going to have a number of events on Friday, March 26th. You are all, free, open, please, you're all welcome to attend. We are going to be having a keynote address with Nikia Walker at 9 o'clock from 9 to 10 a.m. And then we're going to be having a movie screening and discussion panel about a documentary film called Picture a Scientist, which is about, deals with a lot of the struggles with women getting in the sciences. And it's a very, very frank film, but it won a lot of awards, so it should be good. And then lastly, from noon until 1 p.m., we're going to have kind of a speed mentoring session with a lot of different women who are in different facets, either academics, industry, or administration. And they are, again, going to be kind of broaching questions and certain things, particularly maybe things that come up now during the COVID epidemic and some of the issues that women, have actually been having in terms of managing and being able to do their work under those circumstances. So that's going to be open to any kind of mentoring question you have. So that's it. Sorry. Just wanted to make a plug for that. Thanks.
Thanks, Joelle. That's a great summary of our upcoming events on March 26th. So today is the last full school day before spring break at Northeastern. We go away for a week. So when you come back, don't forget the following Friday, March 26th, we have these wonderful events that are all free. And if you know anybody who hasn't registered or thought, oh, I cannot come today, so maybe I cannot go the following Friday, please do join us. And also we do have some presents. So this is the conference t-shirt that I've been wearing today. And thanks to Jackie for dropping this off on campus where I was yesterday. And I drove out to Brecky's house yesterday to make sure that she gets the t-shirt. And this is for all of you and for our panelists. And just as a thank you to remind us of this great event that's been taking place every year for the last, this 4 years. And thank you all for coming. Thanks to all the panelists and everybody else who's going to participate March 26th. And we have such great alumni, Nikki and Leslie. You really, for example, make my and Brecky's jobs at Northeastern as professors such a great experience to be able to teach you, see who you've become and who we've met from the day in class to now where you are at, and to take part of the panel. This is really what we treasure every day as part of our jobs. And to make that difference is so heart-filling. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for being here and all of our amazing people. Without Joelle, the staff of Chicago Czech, our MARC administrator, Dorina, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you so much. And we'll see you hopefully Friday, March 26th.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.